I think sir is joining. Evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Hi, hi, how are you?
All good, sir. Am I audible to you, sir?
Yeah, can you see me clearly?
Yes, very much, sir. Very much.
Yeah, you're audible and loud and clear.
Yes, sir. So, sir, to tell you, I've been always telling Angad that you are one of my inspiration. I always look up to you, and it's a privilege, sir. It's a privilege to get that opportunity to talk to you. And
It's my pleasure to be here with you, and I've heard so much about you from Angad
yes, sir.
and all the good work that you're doing, and your marathons, and your comrades, and everything.
Yes, sir. Now, like we have been following you for pretty long from the time you started your Ironman journey. And I'm modeling on that. Someday I want to do Ironman, sir. So I'm a big fan of you, sir. More than anything
Of
else.
course, you can do it. Anybody can do the Iron Man.
So sir, we have a lot of friends, youngsters, runners, triathletes, so many people listening, and they were all waiting for this day. A lot of people messaging me. It would be great to hear, sir. So welcome, sir. It again a great day for me personally, and we have all heard so much about you, and like need no introduction, sir. You need no introduction because you are inspiring a generation of youngsters, people who are in middle age, above 40s like me. So thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Angad, also to connect.
Thank you, Vijay. Thanks for having me over out here today, and I look forward to this evening.
Yes, sir. Sir, in fact, a lot of our young friends, most of them are aspiring to join the various academies, either after MBA or CBSE or through various entries. So they keep on asking various questions. One of the give back to the community is that where we had come from, being from the armed forces, and then helping with youngsters to get there. So that is the prime idea of getting all the prominent people, personalities like you, sir. So sir, my first question to you, like I'm sure you would have had many interviews. So my first thing is, what was that motivation for you to join the armed forces, sir? Because you are from the armed force family. So what was that motivation, sir?
In the time when I was a youngster, there weren't too many distractions around us. We had no social media. And like you said, I came from an army family. My grandfather had also been in the police. My father was in the army. And three of my sisters got married to army officers.
Oh,
And as I grew up, I just saw only the army around me. And I never ever had, in a thought in my mind to join any other profession. So from the very childhood, I was attuned to the army way of life. I was inspired by what my father was doing. I had gone along with him to his units, wherever he was posted, saw the various activity, and all that excited me a lot. And the army that time, we also had the 1971 war with Pakistan. I
exactly.
was at that time, yeah, I was in the fifth, and that left a big, deep mark on my mind. It was we used to have these blackouts, air raids over Delhi. My dad was posted in Delhi. We used to get into the trenches which we had dug in the gardens in our houses. So all this cocktail of what my father was doing, my sisters getting married to army officers, the 1971 war, the commando comics that we used to read as children, which were written with the war between the Second World War, the Germans and the Allies. All that was a big motivating factor for me, and I wanted to join the army from the beginning. And straight out of school, I joined NDA and into the army.
So it was always army for you, sir. No navy or no
Yeah.
air force. Because I'm bit selfish, being a naval officer, so that's why I'm asking you that question. So it was always
So to
army.
be honest, yeah, no. So to be honest, it was not. It was never Navy. It was Air Force.
Okay.
As my first choice, but I was the only son my dad had, and he said that you join the Air Force and you're going to get killed in a plane crash. So he didn't give me permission to join the Air Force, and therefore I joined the army.
Okay, sir. And sir, like
Yeah.
lot of people ask me these questions. Someone who joins army with a army background, rather a legacy of being from the army. So how easy or how tough is for someone to crack SSB if they have a legacy? So I always tell my answer to them is that I think if you're a civilian from a civilian background, your chances are much more rather than someone who's from the armed forces background, because there are expectations in SSBs and everywhere. Because they think that you have come from a family and a background, so you should know everything. So that is my answer always. So how do you take on that, sir?
Well, I would agree with you only partially. I feel that there's a level playing field in the SSB. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what your economic status is or where you came from. What they're really looking for out there is officer-like qualities, the potential to become an officer. And when I say officer-like qualities, I would like to qualify that by saying three things. That what that really means is that can you become a leader? Can you become a leader of men? Will they follow you? And if they will follow you, why will they follow you? That is what those guys are looking for. And so whether you're an army kid or you're a civilian kid, they're not worried about that. Your dad may be a general in the army, your dad may be a farmer. I don't think there's any bias out there. And they're really not looking at how much you know about the army. They are picking on your intelligence. They are picking on your character. They're picking on your reactions, the way you will react when faced with a difficult situation. Because, war is all about difficult situations, taking quick decisions, being confident, leading people. So I think that's how it goes. This is my opinion.
Exactly, sir. Exactly. So guys, so one question put to rest, because a lot of you used to ask me this question, and like as sir said, my thought was different. I always used to say that it is bit easy for someone who's from the civil background. Like I was from the civil background, but as sir explained, it's a plain field. It's a plain playing field, and they look that OLQs in you. So that is the underlining statement here. So, sir, how, I'm sure it's way, way, way back, because I was there in the SSB in 26 years back, and I'm sure you would have been there much, much, much earlier, sir. So, how was your SSB experience, sir? Because all of us would love to hear that SSB experience. That's what our youngsters always want to hear, that SSB experience, sir.
Yeah, but I'll narrate my experience, but I will also caution people don't go by what I did because times have changed. I went for SSB in 1977. Okay, so that's 43 years ago. And I was studying in a hostel in Mussoorie when I cleared my NDA written exam, and this letter came that you have to now go for this interview. There was no preparation. I had nobody whom I could even ask, because in a hostel, all you have around you is the teachers and the fathers. My school was run by these fathers who were there. So there was no question of them giving me any knowledge about SSB. Therefore, I caught the train. This was in Mussoorie. I caught the bus to Dehradun, and my SSB center was Allahabad.
Okay.
I went to Allahabad, and one of my father's friends was a retired officer in Allahabad. And I think he had served some tenure in an SSB sometime, maybe 20 years prior to the time when I went to him. And so I went and stayed with them for one day prior to the day of my joining the SSB, during which time he gave me an insight on what the SSB is, what to expect, how they will, what kind of questions they will ask and things like that. That was my only preparation. When I reached there were so many people like me, young kids from different parts of the country, Sainik school guys, military school, day schools, different uh, languages. Some of them couldn't even speak proper English, and we were like lost. You are trying to find your way. So the way they put us through that time, it is different now. Now the process is slightly different. We went through the normal routine of filling the forms and stuff which they have even now, and thereafter there was now it's very difficult to recall. So many years have passed, but what I recall was the focus was more upon the group tasks. They used to put us through these group tasks where they have which is there now also, and that is where everybody was trying to emerge as a leader, where trying to give your own idea so that people will start following you and do the group task the way you did. So the group task, I remember, was one of the very important parts. And next was the interview. Of course, yes, the conference, where you are giving your points and all that. But it was not over the duration it is held now. I remember it being just about a little over 2 days, 2 days time. And at the end of that, they line you up. They lined us up. We were wearing those numbers which they gave to us at the SSB. And they started by saying, they started taking names of people who had, famous people, who had appeared and not made it.
Okay.
So what they were trying to actually convey is that even if you don't make it here, you can become famous in life and successful. So this is not the end all. They started with that kind of thing. So they named people who had come earlier for SSBs, but who had not made it, but were now big personalities, like an actor, like a politician, like a big time scientist, like that. And then they called out the names of the guys who had got selected and who were to stay back. And so it was, but it's very hazy. So what I'm telling you is all, I just try to recall it now. I didn't even ask me this question, but that's what it was.
Yeah. Because 77, was the time when probably I would have been in months. Like I was born in December 76, so I would have been a toddler then, and that is the time when we appeared for SSB. And then, sir, how was your NDA exams? Like before SSB, you have to clear your NDA exams. So you had prepared for it, or was it based on your?
I recall doing some preparation. I had picked up a big book, which gave us all questions which were asked in the NDA earlier, and I recall going through some mathematics tuitions because my maths was not that good, and maths was an important subject for NDA. So yes, I prepared. I do remember preparing, but it was not anything more than about, say, 10-15 days of preparation to brush up current affairs and mathematics. The rest of it was, like I told you, I was in the hostel, and so the preparation was very limited. And there were UPSC exams in Delhi, which is probably the same as it happens now. And I was lucky to find my name in the list of people who passed. But I would say, don't go by my experience, because today it is much tougher, and you must prepare. You must prepare well. Don't prepare for a week or 10 days and go and say, because that guy said I prepared for a week, so I'm also going to go prepare for a week. No, you must prepare properly.
Exactly. So, guys, sir is talking about 43 years back, and definitely things have changed from from the time I also appeared. Things have changed. So all of you must prepare, and then don't take every experience of yourself as an experience for you. Things may be different. So, sir, lot of youngsters ask this question, like, what according to you should be few aspects people should take care in SSB, sir? The personality aspect.
Yeah, so like I said, they are looking for officer-like qualities, which I had also mentioned is leadership qualities. And I think you need to look at only three things which lead you towards leadership qualities. And the first is you must exude confidence. So when you are sitting before the people who are judging you, they are experienced people. They know exactly from your body language, from the way you talk, as to how confident a person you are. And confidence can only come in you if you are well prepared. And when I say well prepared, Well prepared means you must know what you're going in for. You must have a knowledge of how the SSB is going to happen, so that you are not, just looking around like I was looking around. I didn't know how it's going to happen, and therefore you a little bit of fear, which shows in your face as lack of confidence, comes in. But if you know what you're going in for, and there are enough people who are here to tell you how SSB is conducted, and confidence also comes out of knowledge. So knowledge of what you are going to say. And when I say knowledge, it is also related to how genuine you appear. You can't fool those people out there. So if you go in for a training, an SSB coaching, they might tell you, this is how you must answer your questions. You must say these kind of things. I don't think that's correct, because whatever answer you give, if you say it with conviction, if you have logic to it, then it is accepted as genuine. Another example I'll give you is, for example, when you fill in the forms the day you go there, and you write, I am very good at, say, basketball. I play basketball. I played basketball for my state. Now, in the interview, when they ask you questions on basketball, you must know every detail. You must know the dimensions of the court. You must know the rules of the game. You must know how many people and what they play. Because if you can't answer your question, what you've written as you are good at, then it shows that you are fudging. You are not a genuine person. And similarly, in every aspect that you fill up in that form, whatever you write to say what kind of a person you are, it should be backed up by the knowledge of that. And that is the kind of knowledge which will give you confidence. And the third thing they're looking at is positivity. There must be positivity in your replies. So, we have the test like the PD, that picture test which you have. Your answers or your story writing, whatever you are going to give, must be positive. If they show you, for example, a knife and say, write a story on it, then you can write a story that somebody's going to carry out a murder, or you can write a story somebody's going to, maybe use it for making a meal or whatever. But they are judging to see how you react or what your reaction is when you are given a situation. Is it a positive reaction? Do you get a positive thought out of what you see, or do you get a negative thought out of it? If you're shown a glass of water which has got 50% water, then there are three answers you can give. That it's a glass of water which was full and now it is half full, or it's half empty, or you can just say that it is half full. So each answer is correct. All three answers are correct. But one of them shows that you're a person who imagined the glass to be full at some time and now it is half full. So those are the kind of things: confidence, genuineness, and your logic. Everything that you say must have a thread of logic.
Exactly, sir. In fact, all officers whom we have interacted, all of us who have gone through the SSBs, so we always tell the youngsters same thing, sir, that your SDT or the self-description test is one of the most important things. Whatever you write, you have to write it genuinely. Like if
Yeah.
as you rightly gave the examples, like if someone say my hobby is reading, so you should know what are you going to read, your authors and things like that. So, so, so
Absolutely.
guys, so guys, the advice from the very experienced sir is that don't fake. Simple, don't fake, and be positive throughout. Be positive throughout. So,
And in
how?
the
Yes,
and in the preparation to SSB, these things are important. If you're going to write that my hobby is reading, then you should know which authors you have read and what books they've written and what do they write about. So all this is part of preparation. Don't just go by what the SSB coaching guys tell you that, this is your reaction and that is your reaction. All this is also must be built in.
exactly, sir. Sir, what do you think about the role of physical fitness during the SSB? During how important is you being physically fit, or you should have some endurance base for your SSB before you either get selected or not selected. So what's your take on that, sir?
I feel really they're not testing you for physical endurance or your physical ability. But it is natural that when you see somebody who looks smart and when you're physically fit, you look smart, you know. So that leaves a very positive impression on the person who's interviewing you. But it's not that if you are physically unfit, you can't qualify because they give you time. You may be even overweight and they will tell you you're overweight at the end of it and they'll give you time to get into the weight that is acceptable and come back to them if you have cleared everything else. So, physical fitness is an added advantage, but it is not a prerequisite.
Okay, okay. So, guys, so physical fitness definitely, adds and give an impression, but definitely it
Yeah.
is not very much required for SSB. You need to be in a physical frame. That's it. So that's how. So now, sir, coming back to once you got selected and friends, let me tell you, sir, जैसे बोलते हैं ना एनडीए में कैडेट very rare a cadet comes who all who tops everything in his 3 years of NDA. I think sir is one of those very rare people who had got all the 6 honors, including the sword of honors. He topped everything. So and physically fit and all the various accolades. So how was your days in NDA, sir? Because a lot of people want to hear because SSB is one part, SSB is over. Now you are in NDA, and everyone is so thrilled about the academy, sir, various academies. So how was your experience in academies way back, sir, way back?
So I just want to correct one of the information that I got the sword of honor in IMA. In NDA, there is no sword of honor. So after doing 3 years in NDA, IMA 1 year, and then that's where I got the sword and the gold and all the other medals that you spoke of. In NDA, of course, I was the Academy Cadet Adjutant, which is the senior most appointment that there is in NDA, and I was the best in marching, best in fitness, and all that. My journey in NDA was very, with a lot of ups and downs. When I joined the NDA, despite having been a sports person in my career, in my life earlier as a school kid, I was weak in PT, and I found that in my first term, I was finding it difficult to cope up with the PT tests which were there, and I was put into a squad which required extra training of PT. And I
Oh,
remember during my second term, when people were going and playing games, I was doing extra PT. But I put in a lot of hard work that time. And by the time I finished my second term and I was in my third term, I was doing the higher PT tests. That was of the next term. In third term, I was doing 4 term PT tests. So I had improved a lot. And thereafter, there was no looking back. So in first and second term were a challenge physically for me. And in this challenge, what happened was that I ignored my academics. NDA is all about graduation also. So you are graduating either with a BA or a BSc. So you need to study. But I was so tired putting an effort in the physical aspects that my grades in academics dropped and dropped in those 2 terms to a point where there was no chance of recovery. And therefore, my balance 4 terms, I focused on the physical aspects. So I got the best in drill, best in physical fitness. I got a merit card in riding, and I was the Academy Cadet Adjutant and best in OLQ. But my academics remained low. And because of that, I missed out on getting any of the, the gold, silver, or the bronze medal. Which I rectified when I joined the IMA. I understood that time, so it was a learning process for me that you need to keep your studies alive. You need to focus on academics along with your physical fitness. So when I went to the IMA, I took special care of studying so that I maintained that threshold of, what is required and put an extra effort in my physical fitness also. I remember when you used to, you run normally in PT time in a squad. So there will be 30 cadets with a drill ustad or a PT ustad going along, and everybody is running at one speed. Now that speed is normally not the speed at which you would like to train if you are looking for, doing better. So I would lift my knees higher when I would run with high knees so that, I worked out probably 1.5 times of what the rest of the squad was working out. And that helped me a lot. So by the time I came to my third term and I passed out, I was very, very fit. I got 6 of the medals, like you were bringing out earlier. With my academics being up there, I got the golden medal. I was first in the order of merit. I got the sword of honor. I got the best in marching, best in physical fitness, best in shooting, and also the first in the armored corps. So I think hard work really is what I can say I did in my NDA and IMA, and it worked.
Yes, and I mean, there's a very, very rare profile wherein, like a topper profile. There's a real topper profile. But as you rightly said, sir, there is no shortcuts. Probably you had given that extra thing when you realized that you're weak at PT in the first semester. So you fought that demon rather and proved to be much, much, much better. And that continues even today. Sir. That continues even today. That is what that is what's special about you. So any experience of some funny experience of the academies, either NBA or IMA?
Many of them, many of them, but one which really leaves a mark, it was a little hilarious. And now when you look back, quite funny also, because we were 4 termers and the 6 termers are the guys who are the bosses. So they're like gods.
Correct.
And there was a coursemate of mine who was caught for some infringement by the academy cadet adjutant who was a 6 termer that time. And they got into an argument because this chap was a very, uptight kind of a chap, my coursemate. He wouldn't listen to what that guy was to tell him. And ACA, the Academy Cadet Adjutant, is God. I mean, if he tells you to do a thing, you do it like that. And if you don't do it, then you are on the wrong side. So he got very upset with him, with this cadet, my coursemate, and told him, go and shave your mustache and come. And this guy refused to do it. Now there was, a confrontation. And these 6 termers then passed an order, the ACA passed an order that the entire lot of 4 termers, the whole course, will shave the mustaches. So after 1 or 2 days of resistance, you can't resist longer because you have a 6 termer in your squadron also, and they were all after us. And we were all shaved off. So all our mustaches went. Now, it can't be that the 4 termers don't have mustaches and the second, third, and the other termers have got mustaches. So we got them all to shave off mustaches. Now there was this academy, National Defense Academy, where only 5th and 6th termers had mustaches and the rest were almost without mustaches. Now when you look back, it's very funny. But that time it was very, very, some people were so upset because they related mustaches to their pride, that, we never cut our mustaches and stuff, but there was no option. Everybody was shaved off. That was quite hilarious. Yeah.
And then later you went on to become ACA in the 6th semester. Sir.
Yes.
So how was that
Yes.
experience? Did you also imply pass some rule, some rule which was like, when you see as a 4th termer?
No, but I remember doing something which I would feel now to have been very mean. We had the movie ABBA.
Okay.
ABBA is a singing group, and this movie had come to NDA. And it was a fantastic movie, and everybody was looking forward to going there. But because the 5th termers had not done something, I remember, I made sure that they don't attend the movie. I called them in bajri order. So you wear your dangaris and you fill your big pack with bajri. And I had them lined up outside the movie hall. So while we watched the movie, they were standing outside in bajri order. And I made them miss the movie. When the interval, I went out to check that they're all there, took the parade state, and so I think that was quite mean. That was.
Also, sir, like we all of us say that SSB Academy, and then passing out parade forms one of those golden memories of our life for any soldier. So how
Yeah.
was it for you, sir? How was it for you, the passing out experience?
So the day I passed out, of course, experience is fantastic. But I had spent 5 terms before that being part of the damn same drill. Now that is a big, big pain because the drill practice for passing out starts 1 month before the passing out. And
Exactly.
you are standing there in the sun and the heat for about an hour. repeating the same procedure again and again, and somebody's making a mistake and you're just standing there. So it becomes very, very irritating. So, you're not really looking forward to that part. Now comes your passing out. So, as part of your passing out, also you're put through the same procedure, which is painful. But the day you pass out, the experience is, of great joy that 3 years of training, what you were waiting for, the time has come. You pass, when you're passing out, you go past the Indian flag, saluting it. The chief guest is also there, and then you go up the steps, and then you go berserk, because once you're out of sight from there, then you throw your berets, and you are congratulating each other, and all that, throwing up each other here and there. So it's a great experience.
And sir, any during your stay, all when you stay in NDA or IMA, did you ever regret कि यार बहुत कुछ हो रहा है रगड़ा and things like that, नहीं हो रहा है types, something like that, because many of them feel that I should not have been here, क्या कर रहा हूँ मैं type. So any such experiences, sir?
Well, you regret the ragda, you are cursing, you are cribbing, but I never had this feeling that I'm in the wrong place. Never once did I feel discouraged that, this ragda wouldn't have happened if I had not joined. No. It was only waiting to pass out. So, NDA pass out, then IMA, the same thing. IMA, the ragda is little less, because, by the time you reach IMA, you have spent 3 years here and you join as a second termer. You have first termers who are direct entries, and then you have the third termers who are 6 months senior to you. And therefore, the ragda is not so much, because the time is short and, you are quite well attuned on how to keep on the right side. But NDA is a different ball game. From first term onwards, you're put through ragda. And I remember some very, very bad ragdas that I went through. There was one day when these 6 months senior to me, 3 guys got hold of me, and they ragdoed me for 2 hours. And the worst part was that they made me drink water in a mug, that big mug, and drink water till I could drink no more. And then they told me to put my finger on the ground and start going round. And when I did that, it came gushing out like, a fire hydrant. I had water coming out of my system like that. Once that happened, then they told me you start rolling without using your hands. So, you do a roll where you land straight on your shoulders in that same water. And by the time that 2 hours finished, my shoulders were swollen. My stomach was churning because I had, drunk all that water. But I never once thought that, why am I here? Because I think the motivation to pass out and become an officer was so strong that I never regretted being there. It was considered just part of the scene. That every day, this is over, now let's look at tomorrow.
And then, sir, that golden moment when you wear the sword of honor in IMA. So, how's that feeling, sir?
Yeah, so I had commanded the parade. And I'll narrate this incident. It was a very interesting incident on the passing out day. Now, the entire passing out course is about 550 officers, cadets, who are going to pass out to become officers. And you are lined up. For those who've seen IMA, there's a building, Chetwood Hall, and the parade ground is on one side, and you are lined up on the other side, which is not visible that time to the people who are waiting for the parade to come. And out there, the adjutant, who's a major, is on a horse, and all your drill ustads are there, and they're warming you up and getting you ready, because you're going to now march in and you're going to perform. And it was winter. I passed out in December, 19 December 1981. And the temperatures in Dehradun are close to, 1 or 2 degrees. It's a cold place. So they need to warm you up. We were wearing our blue patrols. And this adjutant was a very, very, vivacious officer from Punjab Regiment, Major Tripat Singh. Later on became General Tripat Singh. And he used to be very, hands-on. If a cadet was misbehaving, he would abuse him. The choicest of Punjabi galis. And he would also take his horse up, and, when it is cold and the horse breathes out, you have that, you can see the, foggy air coming into your face. And if you would then move, he would slap you. Now, this was happening. There was a cadet coachman of mine who was shuffling around. And this adjutant walks up to him, takes his horse up to him, and they have a argument. And he tries to hit him, and that guy catches his hand. So he caught his hand and he told him, "Don't hit me. Just because you're a major, you think you can hit me? You can't hit me." Now, that guy knew he's passing out and going to be in 1 hour. He's going to become an officer. So the guts had come. So what does Triple Singh do? He gets off from the horse. And he tells him, "Okay, I'm taking off my tabs." He opens his ranks. He says, "I'm no more a major. Now let's go and we'll sort it out before you pass out. We'll see who's going to hit whom." Now that guy realized that this is going too far, the cadet. Because, you can't be getting into a wrestling match out there with your adjutant 1 hour before passing out, whatever you may be thinking you are. So he took a step back and, then there was, "No, sir, no, sir." And he said, "Okay, then apologize." And he apologized. And this guy got back onto the horse and he said, "Okay, now march the parade." And we marched in and the passing out started. So this was an incident which really left a mark on my mind. And then the passing out parade is like, there are 550 people out there. The colors are there. Your parents are sitting there. My sisters had all come with their husbands, all friends. And my wife, who's now my wife, was that time also in the IMA, and she was there. And we were going around that time. I met her in the IMA. So she was also there watching my passing out. So it was a great day for me.
In fact, I should not ask this, sir, but a lot of youngsters had messaged me कि sir की love story भी पूछ लेना sir, possible होगा तो.
Love story. It's an interesting one.
So if you can share, message me sir to ask you.
Yeah. In my third term in IMA, I was the ACA, and the academy cadet adjutant has a telephone in the room. Because at night, you have to give a report to the adjutant to say all is okay. And one Sunday, I remember it was the month of September 1981. And I was sitting bored in my room and I saw the telephone there, and it came to my mind that the principal has got 2 good-looking daughters. And so let me make a call. And I didn't know their names of the girls. I just knew the principal's name. So I rang up. And I also knew that out of the 2 daughters, I want to speak to the elder one. So I rang up and somebody picked up the phone and I said, "Can I speak to Miss Sharma?" So she said, "Which one?" I said, "The elder one." So she said, "Okay, your phone." And the elder one came online and I said, "I am so-and-so." I gave my name as Sunny. I never gave, that's my pet name. Of course, I couldn't say I'm cadet so-and-so. And I want to be your friend. So she said, "It's not possible." She banged the phone down. And this happened about 10 times, in succession. And every time she was banging the phone down. And then I said, let me change tactics. So I rang up and without waiting for the other side, I said, "It's very silly of me to have rung up and, trying to talk to you like this." So the voice on the other side said, "Yes, it's very stupid of you to ring up." And I found that the voice was different. So I asked, "Who's this?" So she said, "I'm Supriya's mother." And that's how I found out the name. So I banged the phone down. And now I had the name. And so this attempt of mine carried on for about 15, 20 days, whenever I got the time. And finally I convinced her that we will never meet in life. And we will only talk on the phone. And she was in school, class 10. And I was IMA last term to pass out. And that's how we started talking. And then the NDA fete came. And I told her that today on the fete, I'm going to come and ask you for a dance. Okay. So she said, "How will I know who you are?" That time there was no social media, no video calls and stuff like that. So I said, "I've got green eyes and I'll come and you'll get to know who I am." And I went there and I asked her for a dance and she says, No, I'm too tired. So she was trying to act a little, difficult to get. So I said, "Okay, you're too tired." And there were 2 other girls there. I took them for a dance and we danced and I left. Which, of course, later she told me she didn't like. And that is how we got to know each other. And that carried on. And then, we got engaged in 1984. That was 3 years after I passed out. And married in 1986, 5 years later. It's been now 34 long years of marriage.
Wow, sir. That's the story. So all guys would be really thanking me to ask you this question and knowing this side, sir. So hi to ma'am. Good evening. Hi to you, ma'am. So you're there, and such a wonderful, sweet story, rather. So
But I
so
want to tell your listeners, don't try it. It doesn't work every time. It's not like the Three Idiots story where, you can get away with the principal's daughter every time.
exactly, sir.
Yeah.
So thereafter, sir, you went on to so many questions I also got from youngsters. Like, since you were so fit, at your prime fitness. So a lot of people ask me, can you ask sir whether did he ever consider to join the special forces? Rather, did that thought came to you to join the special forces? Sir?
Well, actually did. And in 1986, I was going to volunteer for the Para Commandos. And I had just got married in 86. But what happened then was that I got a posting as an instructor to Ahmednagar. Ahmednagar is the Armored Corps Entrance School. So that's the alma mater of the Armored Corps, and I am from an Armored Corps unit, from the tanks. And when I got that appointment at just about 4.5 years service, it was a very prestigious appointment, because to go as an instructor to the Armored Corps Entrance School was something that I always wanted. And when that happened, then I got caught between taking the decision that do I opt for the Para Commandos or do I go for the instructor tenure? And of course, the instructor tenure took the precedence. I was newly married, comfortable life, you're an instructor, prestigious appointment. And once that happened, then I got into the thing, because from after doing the instructor's tenure, I went as ADC to a general, straight from there. And then I went for a long 1-year course called Tank Technology course. And that moment passed. I couldn't, then it was too late to opt.
And then during all your YO courses, I think you topped all of them, sir. Most of the courses you topped. And then how was that feeling of going to one of the most decorated units, sir, the Pune House? So I think you have had a long tenure, and one of the TED talks I saw, one of the features of yours. That's an awesome thing when you were final day of your service. It was goosebumps. So how was that tenure, sir, being there in Pune House with such a decorated regiment?
So the Pune Horse was a dream regiment. It is the most decorated regiment of the Indian Army, with the 4 Victoria Crosses, 2 Paramveer Chakra, 2 Mahavir Chakra, 6 Veer Chakra, and the maximum number of battle honors that any regiment has in the Commonwealth. So now it's over 200 years old regiment. And I could only get there because I had got the Sword of Honor. Otherwise, the vacancy for me to join was not there, because then a cadet just in one course prior to me had joined the Pune Horse. But if you are in the first 20 in your merit of passing out, that time first 20, now I think it's just about first 5, you can opt for whichever regiment you want and you will get it. So because it was such a illustrious unit, somebody had briefed me about it, one of the officers I knew who was from that regiment. Otherwise, I was an infantry opti till I joined the IMA. And then this guy briefed me about, Armored Corps and how good it's an arm of the future. It's got tanks, it's a mobile warfare, and how exciting it is to be in a tank. And that's how I got influenced and joined. And when I joined the Pune Horse, I found that I had to really work hard to live up to the standards that they were in the unit. Because every guy out there was from the top in the merit. And the standards had been set by the 2 Paramveer Chakra, the training which is there. Our emphasis in the regiment was to identify with the men and be with them. You need to work with the men, dirty your hands with them, and not be elitist and stand, aloof. So I'm sure in the Navy, you guys do a lot of work on the deck when you are. The same thing we do with the tanks, where your lives are dependent upon each other in a tank. When I joined, we had Vijayans. So there are 4 men in a Vision tank, and your life depends on the other 3, and vice versa. So that homogeneity has to be developed in the crew, that bonding and that respect. And people will only respect you not for your rank you wear, but for your competence, for your knowledge, for your ability to do better than them in every aspect. So if you are talking of professionalism, you have to prove to them that you are better than them. If you're talking of games, you have to be better than them. If you're talking of going on a marathon, you have to be better. If you are talking of drinking, you have to be better than them. So you can knock down more drinks than they can, and yet stand on your feet and tell them that okay, now don't sway. So everywhere you have to prove yourself, and that is what the ethos in my unit was. And we were groomed like that. And I give whatever I am today to the grooming I got in my regiment. So it was a very, very awesome experience, to put it even mildly. And I stayed in my unit. I commanded that unit in 2003 to 2005, and then I became the colonel of the regiment, which is, like a godfather that they select whoever the senior most person when I retired. So that it was a great journey.
Any one experience out of this? I'm sure there would be thousands of such moments in this entire journey of the career journey, sir. So any one thing which you would like to share with the youngsters to know that how it happens, any one such moment, sir, which you.
Well, I will not talk of anything professional because there are so many things, but I'll talk of an incident which happened when I was being dined in. I was dined into the regiment 1 year after I joined because, the first 6 months there was something or the other going on and they didn't get time. And then I went on the young officers course, which is a 6-month course. And when I got back, my dining in was held. Now, in the dining in, we were 2 officers who were being dined in together. The other officer was 3 months my junior. And what you normally do is we have all these photographs of the Victoria Crosses, the Paramveer Chakra, the medals which, people had won, and the battle honors that we fought. So they make you kneel down. You're in your mess dress, and you are kneeling down and you're drinking a toast to each and every photograph there. And the toast, of course, is neat whiskey.
Oh.
Now, I never used to drink. I never used to drink. And this dining in came and we started off. And the whole aim is that the officers should not be able to reach the dining table.
Okay.
So, yeah. And that is what, so there's a legacy that he got carried away after so many drinks, and, only after 2 hours he was carried away, whatever. Now, in my case, what happened was I kept drinking. And the guy with me, he fell and he was carried out. And it was now, I think it had been 2.5 to 3 hours. And I was not showing signs of getting drunk. And I was surprised myself because, like I said, I never used to drink. And then finally, I did reach the dining table. And I had my dinner. And I gave a speech.
Oh.
And that is recorded still, because a lot of people reached the dining table, like me, when they were being dined in. But during the dining in, they would fall on so somebody fell into the soup. Somebody fell asleep. Somebody, had to rush out and go and vomit. But in my case, I managed to survive it all. And next morning, I had a talk. We had gone on a picnic, I remember, and my talk was on music, Western music. And my talk was to the ladies and officers of the mess, who were all out on a picnic. And I gave this talk. I remember very distinctly giving this talk on music. So that was a very memorable evening for me. Because I pride myself for not having, And a similar thing happened to me when I was a colonel and I got a sortie in a MiG-21.
Okay.
So there was a postmate of mine who was officiating as the AOC, who's in charge of the airbase in Ambala. And he told me, you want a sortie, you come over. Because I told him, whenever you get a chance, give me a sortie. So I was taken up by this wing commander on a sortie in a MiG for half an hour. And his entire effort in that was to make me puke. So he was pulling G. He was taking sharp turns and this and that. But again, I remember I managed to survive. I didn't puke. And I had a fantastic half an hour of a MiG-21 sortie. That was a very memorable time also.
In fact, sir, I think one of your appointments for the provost, you were the first one who inducted the woman in the military police, sir. So
Yeah.
how was that? How was that experience? Like
I
uh,
didn't induct them. They are now being inducted. But I took up the case for their being inducted. So that was 2015 when I had prepared a case to say that we need to get women in the military police. Now, the army brass turned down the case and
okay,
it went up to the chief and it was put away. Uh, 2016, the ministry said, the defense minister told the chief, what are you doing about getting women in the army? And then suddenly, it struck them that there was that case. So they pulled it out again. And that's when it started rolling. And they are now being inducted, or they've just been inducted, the first lot of women who are below officer rank. I,
exactly. I
of
think
course, in the military police, got women officers into the military police. That was during my time. And that was not a big deal because there are certain requirements that a person in the military police should have. And these women met them, and I took up this case, and it worked, and it was appreciated by both the people who were interacting with them, and also by the women officers who joined. Now, these women who are joining as below officer rank, I don't know how this or where they have got posted, but the whole drafting was done by me, and I think it was the need of the hour. And we need to get more women, at least into the military police, because they have a lot of interaction with the families and children, and the sensitivity of gender sensitivity issues need to have them there. I don't know if the Navy and the Air Force have followed as yet.
not yet, sir. Not yet. I think not yet. When the naval
Yeah.
provost, not yet. Not yet. Next, sir, like now coming back to the journey, the beautiful journey of Iron Man, sir. Like to all the friends listening, Iron Man is something like not anyone can become. But I was so humble to say that if you train, you can do it. But being from the sports fraternity and endurance sports, we all know how tough Iron Man is. So what was that trigger, sir, which made you think that you should go for Ironman? Though you had a lot of cycling and running behind you, you had cycled, various parts of the country, long distance cycling rather. So what was that trigger at the age of 58, sir? Like to go for Ironman.
To be honest, it was a personal mission. I suffered a setback in my professional career where I did not get approved for the rank of Lieutenant General when I thought I deserved it. And I had not prepared for that failure. And because I had not prepared for that failure, it set me back, in confidence, low self esteem. And I found I was sliding into a cocoon, uh, keeping away from people, decaying inside, blaming myself. And after 3, 4 months, 5 months into this experience, I realized I needed to do something to get out of this. And when I started wondering what I could do, how could I get out of it, I thought that if I do something really big, I will convince myself that I still have it in me, because I was blaming myself that whatever had happened was because of my fault. And that's how I came on to this idea of doing the Ironman. Because when I was scouting around for something big to do, I thought the Ironman was really big. And it was. Because if you look at the distances, they are so intimidating. And everybody around me was telling me, there's no way you can do it. At 58, you can't do the Ironman. And where is the time? And where is the age? And how will you do it? You're being stupid. So it became a challenge for myself to prove to me that I can do it. And that's how I came on to the event.
So guys, all those who are listening, let me tell you, Ironman is it's a triathlon. It's a swimming 3.8 kilometers, followed by cycling 180 kilometers and running 42 kilometers, all in succession, and you have to complete it in a cutoff of 17 hours. So, Sir is the only general, serving general in the world who had completed that. It was such a big achievement for our country, and all of us are so proud of it. Sir. It's a golden moment for all of us, those who are into endurance. We look up to that. So my question here is, like, even when I did comrades last year, the amount of time you have to put in for training is tremendous. And you being serving at that senior rank, how did you manage that? Sir? Like it's really tough because at your position, working for endless hours and then coming back and training. So how was that experience? Sir? That may help a lot of people who are aiming to go for Ironman, sir.
Well, since it was a personal mission, uh, whenever you do something difficult, like, you talked about the comrades, now the training is difficult. But if you link that difficult training to some bigger purpose in your life, for me, training for the Ironman was a purpose for me to redeem myself off, get my self esteem back. So when I linked it, it became easier for me to be able to endure this problem of training. Now, one is the time part which you spoke. I'll talk of that. And one was in the mind, every day when you're training so long, I took 18 months to train. And I was used to running 42 kilometers. In fact, I must admit that the first 42 I did in my life was in the Ironman. I never ran a full marathon before that. And I had never swum 3.8 either. So all that takes a lot of mental strength. But this linking will help people to sustain through the effort. Now, as far as time is concerned, I had a sensitive appointment. There was no way I could compromise on my job. So you can remove about 10 hours of the day, which goes away in your work, leaving me with 14 hours. And therefore, I had to come out with an out of box schedule to train. And what I started doing was I would get back from office, change, and go for a run from 7 at night to 10 o'clock on the working days. I was in Delhi 5 working days. Thrice a week, I would run. And twice a week, I would swim, same time. And cycling, because 180 kilometers of cycling takes a long time, 6 to 7 hours, I would do only on the weekend. So on a Saturday night, at about 2 a.m., I would start to 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, because that way I could fight the sun, the heat. My event was on 1st July, and the months which are preceding it are all hot months in Delhi. That is April, May, June. So by cycling at night, there was no sun. The heat was less. The traffic is less on the road because you're cycling. You need, better space to cycle. And the pollution is also slightly better. So I used this methodology of training at night and then spend the Sunday relaxing and recouping from whatever I. And so time management, I will say, is very essential for everybody who wants to do anything different. You have to manage your time because it's your mission, it's your goal, it's your dream. And if you don't manage your time, you'll never get it.
Exactly.
So therefore the relevance, and you have to carve out time for yourself. You can't take excuses and say, no, I'm working, I can't do it. I can't wake up in the morning, or, I'm too busy to go to the gym and stuff like that. So it's all finding solutions and not looking for the problems.
In fact, sir, wherever I do an endurance talk to runners and other people, so the same thing I said, I always say that the biggest lie you can ever tell you is that to yourself is that I don't have time.
I don't
That
have
is the
time.
biggest
Yeah.
lie you can always tell you. So you have to take out that time. And so how was that feeling of crossing that finish line at Austria, sir? Because of 3.8 kilometers transition, cycling, transition, running. How was that the event experience?
So, to be honest, I had walked past that finish line so many times in my mind that it was just like I was now replaying it.
Okay.
Because in my training, I used to keep visualizing this technique. I used to use this technique of visualization.
Visualization. Correct, sir.
18 months of training, night after night, day after day, it becomes monotonous. You get low on morale. You start feeling discouraged. So I used to use visualization and think how I will feel when I run past the finish line. Crowds shouting applauding, the guy shouting out your name. That helps build up your morale. So I had crossed the finish line hundreds of times. And I went purely as per the plan I had set, the time plan. I didn't compete with anybody. I had made a time plan. I'm going to swim in so much time. I'm going to cycle in so much time. And I'm going to run in so much time. Whether I'm walking or running doesn't matter. I have to do it in only that much time. I could have completed it earlier. But I went just by my time plan. So when I finished the event, really, I was not feeling anything different because, like I said, I had done it so many times. But the feeling started setting in the next day when I suddenly realized that I have done it. Before that it was too numbing. I was too stunned to think. But it's a awesome feeling later on. But when I did it for the second time, when I did my second Ironman, and I wanted to improve my time, and I managed to improve it by 40 minutes. That time, the feeling I had when I crossed the finish line was emotional. I mean, I had to go and sit down, and I cried to myself for about those 30 seconds where I felt, I have managed to do it. I improved my time. So it's a great feeling.
In fact, I must tell you, sir, that the moment you cross that finish line in Austria, so everywhere in the endurance community, it was there, and then all of us being from the Forge, we were so proud. We were so proud that, only general in the world to complete. So I'm just letting you know that emotion that probably we have not connected.
Thank you. I didn't know this was happening because after that we went off on a holiday, for about 10 days. So I had no idea what was happening out here.
Seriously, sir. Seriously. And guys, you can see that video where sir crosses the finish line is there on YouTube on any this thing. So that feeling, sir would also agree with me since I had exactly the same visualization day in and day out of crossing the comrades. That feeling of crossing with the tricolor, nothing can beat it, Nothing in this world can beat that feeling. So that is what sir also said. The visualization helps in all the spheres of your life. So all of you, please follow that. And so, sir, to
In
take
fact,
the yes, sir.
I want to do the comrades also. So it's one of my dreams to go for the comrades because comrades is the endurance run of the world. If you haven't done the comrades, you are not a runner. So
For you,
it's one of my.
for you, it would be a cakewalk, sir. I bet.
No, it's not a cakewalk. No event is a cakewalk. No event is a cakewalk. So I know the amount of training that it needs, and it's still there on my list.
So if you are planning for next year, sir, so we are also there for our second down run. So it would be
Okay.
great if you join next year.
No, I don't think it's going to happen next year because with this pandemic on,
Yeah.
the running itself has taken a thing. But I'm going to do another Ironman, and I will then build in the comrades also somewhere. Yeah.
So last couple of questions, sir. So what's your take on age is just a number, sir. A lot of people give that excuse कि मैं बूढ़ा हो गया या मेरा एज ऐसा है, I cannot do 40 plus. What is your take? Because you are an example, sir. You are doing Ironman at 58. Very few of them. So what's your take on that, sir?
No, I firmly believe that you are as old as you feel. And I keep telling people that every person has got 3 ages. Okay. When you say 58, that was my biological age. It was the age from the day I was born to the day when I did the event. Apart from that, there are 2 other ages. One is your mental age and one is your physical age. Now, this is my theory. Okay. So people shouldn't start Googling it and stuff like that. And I believe that we get, when we say you're too old, we are not feeling that way. We have been made to feel that way. People all our lives are telling us, behave your age. Now you have become a father, don't do this. Now you have become an officer, don't behave like this. We are put into a box. We are templated. And we start believing it. That at the age of 60, you need to be walking with a stick. Or maybe at 70, you need to be walking with a stick. You don't need to be thinking like that. So you need to get out of being stereotyped. You need to get out in your mind from getting into that box, coming out of it and doing what you want to do. So when I talk of mental age, it is how you feel about yourself. If you believe what people are telling you that, no, you're too old to do it, then you'll be too old to do it. But if you believe that, no, I can still do it. Why can't I do it? Then your body will only react if your mind tells it to. And next is the physical age. And that will come by your training. You can be 60 physically when you are 20. There are a lot of people who are physically unfit. And you see this guy, Fauja Singh, running a marathon at 100. It's not that he was born with some extraordinary genes. He has conditioned himself. He has trained. His mind is trained. All athletes train their minds. So it's all in our mind. We need to start thinking out of the template put onto us. So that is what I feel. And you are as old as you feel you are, and age is only a number. That's why I keep saying it.
Yes, sir. So, thank you, sir. That's a wonderful, take on your age. Age is just a number. That was a wonderful description, and I totally agree to it. Because there are many people who are 30 and they are already 75. So
Yeah.
they are just at 30, but they are already 75. So all of us. So what's the final question, sir? Before I don't want to take much of your time. What would be your 2-3 advice to all those who are listening? Most of them aspirants and athletes. A lot of them are there. What would be your golden advice? Final golden advice?
So to each person out here, I want to start by saying that you must see where you must realize, or you must know where you want to see yourself after 10 years, 20 years. Whether you're an athlete, where you want to see yourself in a few years, what is your dream? You must have a dream. You must have a destination that I am heading to this side. Very important. Secondly, you can get there by two things: hard work and confidence. Hard work in every event, I would say 70 to 80% of the outcome is dependent upon your hard work, and 20 to 30% of the outcome is dependent upon your luck. This 20 to 30% of luck is not in your control, but the 70 to 80% is in your control. So work hard. Whether you are going for an SSB or a written examination, or you're an athlete, or whatever you're aspiring for, nothing can replace that hard work. Believe in yourself. You must have your self-confidence, because that is something that will see you through. That is, get your mind to work over your body. Your mind must start. I believe that every battle that you win has to be won twice. First time in your mind, second time on the field. So in your mind, you have to first win the battle, that I can do it. And lastly, age is only a number. You're never too early and never too late. So don't wait for the right time aayega, main tab karunga jaake. No. When it comes in your mind that now I want to do something, analyze it, make your plan and go for it.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time, and let me know, it's a fanboy moment for me, because you are like my idol always, and you will always be.
Thank you.
So it's a great feeling, it's like ordinary cricketer speaking to Sachin Tendulkar. So that is the feeling, sir.
Come on.
And thanks to Angad. Angad is a good friend, and thanks to him to connect, to you, to all of us. So thank you so much, sir, and wishing you and your family happy Dashera. And my regards to ma'am. My regards to ma'am.